All right, everyone, here's perhaps a foreshock, a little bit of a forewarning about what's been happening in China. For some time, I've said that China ultimately is a paper dragon, paper tiger. It looks really ferocious, but there's not a whole lot actually underpinning it. And now we see, again, a foreshock of perhaps that on display. Apple, one of the biggest companies in the world, a big player in China, one of the main manufacturers there. I don't even want to know how many people they employ to make their shitty products and re-import them here and still mark them up. Apple's smart because they realized that they didn't have to mark their prices down if they were re-importing Chinese goods and calling them made in the USA because somebody slapped a cover on them here in a nice brightly lit factory while a bunch of sweatshop workers labored away at 12-hour days, 6 days a week over there. They're saying that they're going to switch some of their manufacturing to India. Some of the new iPhones, I guess, are no longer made in China. They've been assembled from Indian components. By the way, that's not going to affect the price of the product. When you're marking up your product 500-600% because your fans are gullible and for some reason are willing to pay huge amounts of money for basically the Apple logo, the fact that it happens to be made by fucking Crapple. By the way, boycott Apple. They're pawns of communism. If you're willing to do that, you've marked it up already so much that if it costs 10-20 cents more per product because it's in India instead of China, who cares? This hits China double. It takes some jobs out of China and it puts them in its main competitor. India is the only other local economy that has that kind of output, that has that kind of massive manpower to potentially be used for both skilled and unskilled labor. Apple's basically undercutting China right now. It'd be good if more U.S. manufacturers would do this. It's fine to make certain components in foreign lands, but once the country becomes so hegemonically powerful over your company, they can tell you what to do, like it does with Blizzard or the NBA, it becomes a little problem. India, I don't think... I have a feeling that India would have more restraint in doing so. I think they've pressured a few video game designers before. Didn't they pressure Bethesda? I think over the Fallout titles because they call the cows Brahmin in there, the two-headed cattle, and that was considered insulting towards the Brahminic class under Vedic lore there in India, and I think they banned that particular mention from the game. Otherwise, nobody gave a shit. China, meanwhile, in Fallout Chinese version, you'd have to be playing as a Chinese ghoul soldier or something, liberating the people of the United States for the glory of communism and setting up work communes, I guess. It'd be a pretty boring game. You'd starve to death on the first day no matter what you do, so you're fucked. And there is no God mode unless you choose to play as Winnie the Pooh, I suppose. Kim Jong-un, maybe. That'd be the North Korean version of Fallout would be something else. That would be a magical game. I wish that North Korea would make video games and that like some crazy person would bootleg them and bring them into the Western market. Can you imagine how great that would be? Oh my god. I literally, anything's possible at that point, considering the number of glitches that would be in the game. 32-bit. 2 megabytes of memory required to run this game. Only compatible with Windows XP. No, getting back on subject though. Apple decreasing anything in China. Would this have happened 5 years ago? No, everyone was whole hog for China. Oh my god, we're going to build 10 more factories. Apple increases manufacturing. Google increases output, tries to make new search engine that allows dissidents to be targeted more easily. They backed off on that project real quick when that was revealed. All of these companies have been pouring resources into China. To see one of the most, admittedly, strategically intelligent tech firms withdrawing from China and putting stock in India. They probably should have started doing it years ago, but better late than never, and it's a foreshock, I think, of what's to come. As China exercises more totalitarian rhetoric over U.S. firms that have done business with it, it is inevitably going to cause some nervous individuals to say, maybe instead of having 80% of our manufacturing in Beijing, we should only have 10% of it in Beijing. Maybe we should look into sending some to Hanoi or to Karachi or and elsewhere in the world. Maybe we should bring some of it back to the United States. Inevitably, if China goes into a tailspin, those manufacturing jobs will dry up over there anyway, leading to a second collapse within their economy. What you've got, I think, being no expert in economics, is a situation where, if you have a relatively elementary understanding of why China is as large and powerful as it is, what would happen is that first you get four shocks like this. Some of the manufacturing leaves, growth stalls out. Once the growth begins to slow, people are more reluctant to invest. The government of China is more reluctant to begin investing, starts pumping its own economy frenetically, trying to get the investors to come back, goes into debt potentially, goes into a downward spiral. Because what happens is that then more confidence is lost. Chinese businesses, they'll be fine potentially because they're held within China. Foreign companies don't really have any sway over Chinese matters, just quite the opposite. Some of those investors may literally flee China. Why do you think so many of those people have bought shops and storefronts here in the United States? The Chinese investing class loves to buy U.S. goods. By the way, Japanese investors used to do this back in the 70s and 80s. And people at the time were worried that Japan was going to replace the U.S. They'll own the United States soon because they're buying property. What it actually was a symptom of the opposite. They were betting on the U.S. making it. When U.S. manufacturers and companies were buying things up in China, in their mind it's them becoming more powerful. Really, it's a symptom of China becoming powerful. So when the world's largest company, arguably, certainly one of the most valuable, begins taking some of that back out of China, that's a big tell, a bellwether, I think, of what's to come. I don't see good things over the next few years for China. By the way, I'm not sitting there applauding that fact. While it's necessary to get rid of Chinese imperialism, while it's necessary to fight communism, one thing we have to understand is that if the Chinese economy suffers, it will negatively impact us. It will send the United States into a recession. It'll actually make it more difficult for businesses to begin withdrawing more. They're going to have to look to greener pastures elsewhere in Asia mainly, parts of Africa possibly. China's investment into East Africa, by the way, creating some infrastructure, imperialistic as though it may be, that could dry up and leave behind a massive power vacuum as well in some of those East African nations, cause regime change there. It would have a definite ripple effect across the world. The United States goes into recession, it affects Europe. Europe has problems, it affects, everything will be affected. The entire world's economy will be reduced, at least for a time. The hope is that this doesn't happen soon. The hope is that companies in the U.S. restructure things, save themselves from the inevitable collapse of China that is coming. China's the world's biggest quadruple bubble at this point. You don't have to study economics to understand that. China's grossly overvalued. U.S. manufacturing needs to leave China and go elsewhere. Some of that inevitably goes to countries that aren't the U.S. Some of it may come home. That could help us, I think, long term. Ultimately, the U.S. needs to restructure its business tax code as well to take advantage of the situation. Look, we can make a lot of money if we take advantage of it. You let moron liberals run things and it's not going to happen. You let people like Trump run things, maybe we do a little bit better. We'll still enter a recession, but then and thereafter, once the recovery happens, it'll be an even better recovery than what we're currently going through, I think. That's about all. Peace out.